Hi, thanks for joining us. My name's Scott Faber, and I'm here with the Environmental Working Group. The toxic forever chemicals that are building up in our blood have been linked to cancer and to harm to the reproductive and immune systems. In particular, scientists warn that PFAS could be making our vaccines less effective. In his campaign platform, President-elect Biden pledged to make PFAS a priority. It's the first time any candidate for the White House has done so. Today, we have two PFAS champions to help us understand what a Biden administration can and should do to address the PFAS contamination crisis. Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, who's the author of the Pfas Action Act, and PFAS attorney and author Rob Bilott, who was portrayed by Mark Ruffalo in the hit movie Dark Waters. After we hear from Congresswoman Dingle and Rob Bilott, we want to hear from you. Please add your questions and comments in the comment section of our Facebook page, and we'll get to them after our speakers. Now it's my honor to turn things over to a true PFAS champion, Congresswoman Debbie Dingle.
Thanks, Scott. And good afternoon, everybody. It's great being with you, and thanks for tuning in on a subject that the three of us are absolutely passionate about every single second. First, a quick thank you to Scott and everyone at the Environmental Working Group for what they do to advance our knowledge and our understanding of PFAS and so many other environmental issues, and what needs to be done at the policy level to protect the American people for PFAS, but from so many other things as well, from the notorious forever chemicals, which, too many people have yet to know what PFAS is or how many places it is, or that it is a danger to them every day. Rob's been fighting this forever, and Scott and I have sort of become army members of Rob. So, and I want to tell you what an honor it is for me to share this virtual stage with Rob Bilott, who's been litigating environmental law for decades and has had, in many of things that he has done are solely responsible for, and the impact he's had for shining the national spotlight on the harms of PFAS. So Rob, thank you for taking up this fight and just always being there. There are thousands, everybody knows this, of different forms of PFAS chemicals, and many have been linked to very serious health diseases and cancers. And they're all around us, and we don't even think about it, and it's why we need to act. As some may know, Michigan has been hit hard by PFAS. We have almost 150 sites across the state, but it's largely because Michigan's taken a proactive approach so that we're measuring and testing and identifying PFAS sources wherever they exist to ensure our drinking water is clean and safe. Rashida Tlaib and I just had two new sites that were found in our districts abut. And there were two new sites, one with very, very concerning high numbers, could turn out to be, quite frankly, one of the highest in the country of all the finds. And we are proud of the fact that in August of 2020, Michigan adopted a new strong drinking water regulation standard in the absence of an EPA drinking standard. But I really want to make this clear. People do not understand. We do not have a drinking water standard for PFAS in this country. And, people don't understand that it's in everything. It's in everything. We know it's in some direct chemicals, but it's in socks, it's in cookware, it's in clothes, it's in places that you do not, besides the fact we worry about it in the water, in the groundwater, but it's used in things that people use every day. And that's why this education system is so important. It was used in firefighting foams, which, yes, we need to put out massive fires, but we need to develop ulterior, because that firefighting foam is what's put so many military sites with such high numbers. So I've been pretty active on this subject since I've come to Congress. In August of 2018, it was discovered that the Huron watershed that's in my district was contaminated with PFAS, and people had caught fish a year before. It's in fish because they're in the water, and they had the fish for a year before they tested it and didn't put out a do not eat the fish order. So people inadvertently are getting exposed to PFAS without knowing its dangers, knowing about it. And quite frankly, we all need to rise up and yell about it. So this past year, I was honored to take the lead on the Pfas Action Act, which was enacted in the House of Representatives this past January with a lot of work, Scott was incredible, Rob, everybody. It was hard, but we got it done. It was a comprehensive landmark package of bills that would regulate PFAS chemicals, clean up contamination, and protect public health. And with the help and support of EWG and many others, we got that package passed in 2020, and we've been trying to get the Senate to take it up since then. It is going to be a top priority in the new Congress. It is our intent to reintroduce it. I am working with Frank Pallone, the chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. We think this can be a very fast environmental win, and we will be introducing it very quickly in the new Congress. We need to jumpstart the cleanup process by designating these chemicals as hazardous. You know, things that can kill you shouldn't be hard designating them as hazardous. We need a strong national protective standard for drinking water. When Donald Trump became president, I asked the first EPA administrator, when will we have this? And promises were made. 4 years later, promises not kept. And it's just unacceptable. And we've got to ensure that the federal government's providing robust funding and resources to our states and cities to mitigate the crisis. So looking to the next Congress and working with a Biden-Harris administration, there are going to be 3 core actions that we're going to be prioritizing, as well as urging the next administration to act on, to take full advantage of this opportunity to make it real and to actually make progress on PFAS instead of just talking about it. We will be, as I just said, introducing the Pfas Action Act in January to keep the pressure on and signal to the incoming administration it's a top priority of the Congress. I have senators in the Senate that are working very closely with us. And the bill will include setting a national clean water drinking standard, designating PFAS as hazardous to jumpstart the cleanup. We plan to expand on the comprehensive package where possible over the next year through the legislative process, including banning PFAS in food contact containers, so like pots and pans in food storage and in cosmetics. Secondly, we're working with the Biden-Harris administration to knock out important PFAS mitigation policies immediately that can be done through the regulation process that aren't going to require an act of Congress. Regulating PFOA and PFAS as a hazardous substance under the Superfund law to accelerate the cleanup process is one regulation that the new administration would be able to implement almost immediately. By the way, something I've long championed. And third, we need to continue to speak out, which Rob's been doing forever. Scott and I joined him, educate the public on the harms of PFAS, and continue to inspire a grassroots movement to act on cleaning up and ridding the harmful forever chemicals from our society with sound policies that are grounded in science. I know, something new, science. We'll need to grow our bipartisan support of the Congress Act, but we did have significant Republican support when we passed it in January. So this is going to be one of our top focuses when we return. Going to be one of mine. Already talked to everybody, many of the new incoming people. Before I turn it back over to Scott, I just want to say how over the last few years, EWG has been doing some really outstanding work in helping to educate the public on the harms that are associated with PFAS, collecting the independent data that we need so that policy is based on factual data. He's rallied the grassroots support, and he's assisted us lawmakers with good, sound policies to protect Americans long term. So I'm proud to be a partner with these 2 fights. Scott, thank you, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you, Congresswoman Dingle, and it's an honor to work with you on this issue as well. I like to say the only thing more persistent than PFAS is Congresswoman Dingle. So now it's my honor to turn it over to PFAS attorney and author Rob Bilott, who of course was portrayed in the movie Dark Waters, and also has published a fascinating book, Exposure, that's so good that I read it twice. It's really fantastic storytelling, as well as a great legal thriller. So thrilled to turn it over to you, Rob.
Well, thanks so much, Scott, and thanks, Congresswoman. It's really an honor to be sharing the stage with both of you, and I echo the comments about the fantastic work that EWG has been doing to raise awareness of this issue, and the Congresswoman as well, and the folks working with everyone here to try to raise understanding and awareness of what this is, which is a national public health threat. That's going on in the time of a massive pandemic as well. It's encouraging to hear the plans and the discussion about the future here and getting PFAS properly addressed. This is something that has been going on, unfortunately, the contamination for some 60 or 70 years. And a lot of that, unfortunately, was covered up, and the information was withheld from the public, from the scientists, from the regulator, from legislators, until relatively recently. It was through court cases, which frankly, as a lawyer, I'd be the first to tell you, people shouldn't have to go to court in order to get this kind of information out and to get their health protected. But there have been action plans over the last couple of years as well, going back some as many as 10 years, that we really need to get the actual action done. And it is beyond time to move forward with actually giving the impacted people out there, the people that have been exposed to this, that are drinking it in their water, that are dealing with the potential health threats, give them the tools to finally hold those responsible. And that's really the key. We want to make sure that when we move forward here, that the parties that are really the responsible ones are the ones picking up the tab, not the taxpayers, not the states, not the water providers, not the firemen or the firehouses. But there are companies out here that made these chemicals knowing that if they put them out there into our world, they would get into our environment. They would stay there virtually forever, and they would get into us and stay there. They would get into our water. And we need to be doing everything we can to make sure that those responsible are held fully responsible for picking up those costs. And as you heard, this is something now where we are dealing with drinking water contamination all over this country, if not all over the world. It's in the soils all over our country. It's in vegetation, it's in crops, it's in our products. These are going to be high costs, and we need to be making sure that when we move forward to give people the tools to hold those really responsible, and make sure that the victims here are not the ones left holding the bag. And it's encouraging to know there's a coalition working on this to make sure that we move forward and put the right tools in place. So I really appreciate everything you're doing, Congresswoman, and everything EWG is doing to raise awareness on these issues, to have these discussions, and to make sure that we keep moving this forward. With the release of the movie, for example, there's been an incredible amount of public awareness that I'm hoping we're able to keep that momentum going. I think the public is speaking out that it's time to act. It's beyond time to act. And I look forward to actually getting that done. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Rob. And I'm going to ask my colleague, EWG Legislative Attorney Melanie Benesh, to join us for the questions and that we're getting. If you do have a question, just put it in the comment section of your Facebook page. Congresswoman Dingle, you mentioned that one of the first things that the Biden administration will do is designate PFOA and PFAS as hazardous substances.
Well, I didn't say they would. I said I was going to urge that, but I'd like everybody here to help urge that too. That's what I'm going to work with Rob.
Well, help, and this is really a question for both of you. Why is it so important that the Biden administration, which had pledged in their campaign platform to designate PFOA and PFAS as hazardous substances, why is it so important that they do take that step?
I think that the country understands in a way that they didn't 5 years ago, that not everybody has clean water as a human right, which, by the way, I think water as a human right is something we should also be getting through in this Congress. But people are drinking and using and swimming and fishing in places that are not safe. And we know that. We have the empirical scientific data that tells us that people are getting cancer, they're getting kidney damage, they're getting other kinds of diseases from these forever chemicals. You need to know, I mean, Rob knows even more about this than I do, because he's been working on it for years in court cases and defending some of these people. It doesn't leave your body. It builds up. You cannot get rid of this. That's one of the problems that we have right now, is trying to determine how you destroy this chemical. That's why it's called the forever chemical. And so the first thing you do is, when you know that something's causing that kind of damage to human beings and the water you drink and the surrounding land, you ban it. And it shouldn't be that hard when you know something's this poisonous.
And Rob and Melanie, help us understand the legal consequences of a hazardous substance designation. That's one of the questions we're getting. Melanie, do you want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. So I guess I would start by saying that there are an enormous number of contaminated places in the US. And the work of cleaning up all of those polluted communities is really a big job. It's one of the biggest jobs that the EPA has. And the EPA is tasked with cleaning up roughly 800 of these hazardous substances that are regulated under CERCLA, which most of our listeners probably know as the Superfund law. And PFAS is not on that list. And so when you think about the big task that EPA already has in thousands of communities, and the limited resources that the agency has, which has gotten smaller over time, they really have no choice but to prioritize cleaning up those hazardous substances. And so just from a practical agency resource perspective, adding PFAS to the hazardous substance list elevates the profile of that chemical, and it puts a little bit more impetus on EPA to clean up sites that are contaminated with PFAS, and in some cases, sites that are contaminated primarily with PFAS and not with other chemicals. But there are other really significant consequences that come with that designation. You give the EPA a lot more tools to recover money if they are paying the upfront cost of those cleanups. It gives EPA a lot more power after they identify who's responsible for making this mess, who has actually released those chemicals into the environment that people are now getting exposed to through their drinking water, through their food, through the lead in soils in their communities. And once EPA identifies those polluters, gives the EPA a lot more power to go after them, to recover some of their costs, to actually hold them liable, to actually make them pay something for that cleanup. And then also just it lowers the bar for initiating cleanup, triggers some mechanisms within the law that would automatically require that sites be investigated to determine if they need to be cleaned up, helps other government agencies like the Department of Defense that have contaminated a lot of places with PFAS. It really gives the EPA and communities more tools to hold those polluters accountable. So it's really one of the most significant things that, that a new administration could do. And as great reporting from Sharon Lerner at The Intercept has shown, there is already a rule that has been written that is just sitting at the White House right now. And so a lot of the legwork has already been done by EPA, and we really just need the administration to take it across the finish line.
Yeah, I think speaking in maybe a little more general terms, historically, the people who've been exposed and injured by this PFAS contamination have faced incredible hurdles in the courts because these chemicals were not regulated and they were not identified under various federal laws or statutes as being toxic or hazardous or regulated in some way. And that created incredible hurdles for those moving forward to try to get anything done. And we just need to making sure, though, as we do move forward, that we're using the tools that hold the right people responsible, that hold the manufacturers who knew this stuff was going to be a problem when they made it and put it out there, versus the innocent victims down the line who weren't told, what they were being given, or had no idea, that was going to end up in their water supply if they're a city. So, it's going to be an incredibly important process because, as Melanie mentioned, one of the problems that have been occurring to date has been the Department of Defense. A lot of these sites are outside military bases or defense facilities, where the Department of Defense has been taking the position and using as a defense, that it's not regulated, and therefore we can't go in and clean it up because we have to have that. We can't use our money that way. It has to be on this particular list. So it's been used as a sword, unfortunately, for many years as well. And in the meantime, the people that suffer are the people who are continuing to drink it and continue to be exposed to it while this fighting goes on about who should be responsible. And it should be pretty clear who ought to be responsible here. These chemicals were made by a fairly small group of folks, and they had incredible amount of information and knowledge, and they made an incredible amount of money for many, many decades pumping this into our environment, and they should be paying to clean it up.
One question that we've gotten, and Rob, you understand this better than anyone, is why will things be different under a Biden administration? When Rob was the lawyer who discovered all of these industry documents as through the legal discovery process, I believe President Clinton was in office. So we've had multiple Democratic and Republican administrations, most of whom, all of whom, arguably have done very little to reduce ongoing releases of PFAS or to clean up legacy PFAS pollution. For all three of you, why will things be any different with this administration? Why do you think that?
I'll jump in first just to say I'm hoping it's because there is so much more public awareness now and so much more understanding in the public about what's been covered up and who's been doing the covering up. So that hopefully we won't be relying upon, the companies, scientists and consultants to draft our rules and our laws, and that people they understand what's happened in the past and are demanding that things be done differently now, because that information's finally out there and people finally have access to it.
Congresswoman Dingle,
Well, for starters, I think I agree with everything Rob said. This administration cares about people, which is something that's been sorely missing for 4 years. And I think that in previous administrations, there was still, the data wasn't there, or as Rob said, the scientists were running it. And because of the work you've done, because of the work that Rob's done, there's been a lot more attention given to what the health effects, the dangers are of this chemical. And what sort of the original producers of this chemical knew? They were monitoring the blood of employees in their plants and knew that it was building up and causing negative health effects. And they have tried to keep that information from becoming public and et cetera. But I think the American consciousness has been woken to much of this after you saw the Flint water crisis. You've seen lead in water, et cetera. But I also think we have far more information 4 years later that's out there in the public than we did, say, 4 years ago.
I agree. And I think all of that public pressure has resulted in President-elect Biden as a candidate actually saying in his environmental justice plan that PFAS is a priority, which I think is really a tremendous accomplishment for all of the public advocates and all of the communities who have really done so much work to raise the profile of this issue. But I think this is the first time that I'm aware of that a presidential candidate has actually committed in their environmental platform to do some very specific things on PFAS, as Representative Dingle, I think, already mentioned, hazardous substance designation, drinking water standards, just using the government purchasing power to stop buying things with PFAS in them. and then finalizing some of that ongoing research that will hopefully inform future regulations. And so I think the administration, the incoming administration, is in a very good place to take action. And I think in addition to all of the science that has already been done, there's also been a lot of movement from state regulators and in the marketplace that I think just puts them on even more solid footing to enact some meaningful regulations.
Great. Well, that's all the time we have today. I really want to thank our experts, Congresswoman Debbie Dingle, Rob Bilott, Melanie Benesh. Thanks so much for joining us, and look forward to working with you, Congresswoman Dingle, to win this fight on behalf of all these communities struggling with PFAS pollution. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.